here we go. All right. So our speaker is author, performer, and teaching artist Joanne Brokaw. She's an award-winning freelance writer and humor columnist. And according to her website, for her 50th birthday, she attended an improv class and her life changed forever. She's been exploring, creating, and sharing what she's learned ever since. Through workshops, classes, and interactive creative experiences, she's helped countless people discover their inner artist by encouraging them to take risks, celebrate mistakes, and focus on the process, not the product. Joanne is from Rochester, where she is active in local art and theater community, and she has many improv and stage productions. A few include the Rochester Fringe Festival, where she did Catharsis Time, We Are Easily Amused, and a Happy Accidents dating show. And then through Out of Pocket Productions, we have got Steppin' Out, where she was the role of Dorothy, and Placebo in the role of Mary, for those who may know. And Joanne has also done some improv teen and tween programs here at the library. She has more coming up. So she was the person I thought of when we wanted a reviewer for a book about an actor. So without further ado, here's Joanne. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't even know where to start, you guys. It's been a morning. Let me start by what I said when Dina asked me to do this. I said, yes, of course, whatever you want, Dina, I'll do whatever you want. And then she handed me like this book. This is the book you're gonna read. And I'm like, oh, all right. Like, I would not have picked this based on the cover of the book. And then I started reading the book. And then I was like, I'm reading a different book that I am in love with. This book is exquisite. Can I talk about this book instead? And she said, no, I really want you to talk about Tom Lake. Now, I don't really know why. And so I said, why did you pick me for this book? And she said, well, it's a book and it's about theaters and you're an actress and we want someone who can be entertaining. And I said, well, I can do one of those very well. And I'd be delighted to talk about this book that I don't care if I ever read again. Not because it's bad. It's not a bad book. It's a good book. But it wasn't until this week that I understand why I read this book. Okay? I am not a theater person. I'm a person who does theater. I don't identify as a theater person. I didn't do theater in high school. I didn't study theater. I have a long list of stage and theater and acting things to my name. But you guys, I'm the oddball. Whenever I go to do a theater and we're in backstage and the theater people are having conversations about all of these productions and Eugene O'Neill and this and that, I don't have any idea what they're talking about. And my ignorance about that shows. And it really affects my self-confidence sometimes about that. But I love being on stage. And so I've had to reconcile this thing about the thing I love to do with the fact that I don't actually have to know how to do it to enjoy it. And so it hit me this week. Y'all, I'm Laura, right? I'm Laura. She's just right for the part she played. She's not a great actress. And so I felt better about talking to you today about this. Here's the second thing I don't know. Did anybody notice the play Our Town mentioned in the book at all? I said to Dina, I don't know Our Town. I'm freely admitting that. I've never seen Our Town. I've never read Our Town because I don't think plays are made to be read, you guys. I think plays are made to be performed. If you're going to read them, you should read them with other human beings who are going to play the parts and like bring it to life with you. So I don't know anything about Our Town. And I thought, so what did I do? I went to Amazon. I got a copy of Our Town. And then I'm like, I'm doing a book report about a book I didn't want to read, about a play I don't want to read. And now I've talked myself into not enjoying the process, which is not what I teach, right? I'm all about the process, you guys. Be present in the moment, be present in the process. And I gave up Shark Heart, which I just will tell you I read for the second time last week because I love it so much. And it will tie into this because guess what other play is in that book? Our Town. And I decided to focus really hard on a few things that jumped out to me about this book and about my personal life that's happening right now and about things that I think I would love for you to take away. So, I learned about Our Town from Jeff Shuda, who is one of the co-owners of Out of Pocket Productions. He teaches English at McQuaid, and it just happens to be his favorite play. And he waxed poetically to me about this play in a way that, in a few words, helped me understand the story of life and love and death, which is life, right? And all of a sudden, Tom Lake took a different meaning for me. Is anybody here as unfamiliar as I am with Our Town, just so that I don't feel like the only person in the room? Anybody? Just oh, thank you for being honest about that. The rest of you experts are going to be able to enlighten us a little bit later about this. So Dina's right. I did not start doing improv until I turned 50. I wanted to take an improv class for my 50th birthday. So I said to all my friends, like, who wants to take this free class with me? And everyone wanted to go, and then no one showed up that day except me. And so I went alone, and I had the best time, and it changed my life for one reason. I was doing therapy, because that's what you do when you get to that age, trying to sort out your life. And all of a sudden, I realized that talking about the things I needed to process was totally different than getting on stage and putting myself in situations where I could relive them with different endings, where I could step into the character of someone who's on the other side and get a little bit better understanding of their perspective. I got better about myself. I got more empathetic, and I had so much fun. It was really life-changing. So it brings me to 10 years. I turned 60 this past May. And I do my own production. Like, if you had told me 10 years ago I'd be doing that, I would never have dreamed that. I'm so sorry. Isn't that kind of like Laura? And again, I'll talk a little about this in a minute, but this book started to resonate me. So I stand here before you today, not hating Tom Lake. I don't know that I'd read it again, because I didn't care about anybody enough to know what actually happens to them every time I put the book down. But it wasn't a bad book, but it was a book I needed to read. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. And then we'll talk a little bit more about your experience too, because I saw some head shaking. I might not be the only person who was like, that's okay. Does anyone else feel that way? Like, yeah, it was okay. No? You loved it. Did you love it? Yes, we're going to talk about that. All right. The first thing that hit me about this book was Laura. I'm going to pull a couple passages up and read, if that's okay. Was when she said, I was Emily because she was the only thing I knew how to do. And I watched the progression of her theater career, and she played Emily, which she hadn't intended to do. And then she played Emily well. And then she auditioned for Emily and didn't get the part. And all she was doing was Emily, because that's what she was focused on. She forgot she did a movie that she was really good at. She forgot that people didn't like what she did. But in her heart, she was Emily. That was who she was. Which asks the question, are we really playing the right parts in our life? Or are we just right for the parts that we're playing? And is that a difference? In our life, do we get up every day and assume a role? Women in the room probably understand what I'm saying here, right? Your wife, your mother, your neighbor, your employee, your whatever. There's a million things. And sometimes they don't fit us. Is that because it's not the right role, or are we just not right for the part? And is it okay to question those things? Because she does that. And is she being honest about this? She was identifying as Emily and not being a great actress. Is it simply because she just didn't want it? I was really taken with, I'm not gonna lie, I went to Spark Notes and looked up a bunch of stuff about this, because some of it just, I didn't know why we were talking about some of it. And there was a lot of talk about converging paths and picking a path. I don't see Laura picking a path. I think paths happened to her and she willingly went that way. I think about, I think you contrast that with Pallas. Pallas was going to knock down every door to get what she wanted, because every time she was faced with an obstacle, it drove her ambition more. And Laura was like, I'm happy doing this thing that I'm comfortable with, but she was also okay moving on with that. Which brings me to Emily, her daughter, who says, Let me see if I'm going to pull this up here. I love Emily. I love Emily because Emily knows exactly who she is. So they're out in the cherry field and they're picking, right? And there's two things here that struck me. Emily lifts a branch and peers underneath it, trying to decide if it needs to be tied. I'm starting to understand something here, she says, and all of us think she's talking about the tree. Everything leads to the next thing. Maisie stops to look at her sister. That's called narrative. I guess they don't teach you that in horticulture school. I understand narrative, idiot, but when you see it all broken down this way, step by step, I don't know, it's different. Emily looks at me. Your grandmother asks you to register people for a play, and you wind up starring in a play, which gives you the nerve to try out for the same play in college, which means that Ripley gives you a part in his movie, but the movie doesn't come out, so you wind up in New York to try out for the play again, but you don't get the part, Maisie says. And so you go to Michigan, Nell says, which is how you get to us. I don't think everything leads to the next thing. I think everything leads to the next thing. And that's where I feel I finally connected with Laura, because that's my own theater journey. That's my own personal journey. That's my own way of being in the world at 60 years old in a way that I was not when I was 40 or 50 or 30 or 59, let's be honest. Because a few pages later, they're picking cherries. Plenty of empty lugs remain, and we'll leave them in the grass once they're full. Emily will drive back later to pick them up. For a while, we say nothing. I'm tired of talking, and of the three, Nell is the best at being quiet. The thing about picking cherries is that you can only look at the tree you're on, and if you have any sense, you'll just look at the branch you have your hands in. The peekaboo ladder is up, waiting for us to clean off the top. We won't look down the rolls at what seems to be an unbroken field of red dots, a pontillist dream of an orchard. If we opened our mind to all the cherries waiting to be picked, we'd go home and back to bed. That's why I asked you to be present in the moment when we came in today, to let go of what you might need while we sat here so we could be together in the room. I'm just going to talk for a little bit, and then you're going to talk, because we're all going to be present together in a conversation that's going to leave us changed when we go, and having communicated, touched, and connected. And that's the theater experience for me. And the other reason I love Emily is because when she and, I forgot the boyfriend's name already. Forgot his name. They decide they're not going to have kids, and they're going on about climate change and why they don't want to bring children into this horrible world. And because of that, they can't have kids. And we've been listening to the past story, which is what I really want to get to in a second, but I wanted to kind of lay the groundwork for this. Benny. Emily sits down at the kitchen chair, and Benny stands behind her. We're all so tired. Emily picks up a fork and balances on one finger. She looks at nothing but the fork. I can eat vegetables and ride my bike and stop using plastic bags, but I know I'm just doing it to keep myself from going crazy. The planet is fucked. There's nothing I can do about that. But I tell you what, I'm going to spend my life trying to save this farm. And if anybody ever wonders what I'm here for, that's it. It's just the focusing on the cherry. Life can be so overwhelming. And I'm reading this book, and I'm following the current, because it takes place during quarantine. But I didn't get the sense that I had I don't know about you, but quarantine was no picnic for me. But it was also really good. It was chaotic, and it was frightening, and we don't know, and there's so much unknown. I don't get that from his, because Patchett did a beautiful job of presenting us with a time and a place to tell a story, and then letting the story be front and center instead of letting like coronavirus. And I just felt in here that I was reminded, this is what I took away again and again, be present in what's happening right now, because everything will lead to the next. How are we doing? Okay? It's weird not to be having a conversation back and forth. So if you have a moment and you're like, Joanne, shut up, you just tell me. Okay, so which leads me to the next thing. because we're gonna talk then about the past. The stories that are familiar will always be our favorites. You guys, is that because they're the most comforting, or is that because we've crafted a narrative about our past that makes us feel good? Like, I've been speaking and I've been thinking a lot about truth because I'm in a weird transition in my own life where I find myself on my own in a really good way, like a very nothing bad. I have nothing to complain about. But you start to think about your past. What's true? Is it true because I experienced it? Is it true because you experienced it? Are both true? What's truth at that point when we're talking about the human experience that we share collectively? Maybe it's all true, just from different facets. And yeah, which brings us to the whole meat that ties this together, which is Laura's past and Duke. And I struggled with this because I figured Duke died in the end, but I didn't know. And again, I didn't care really so much because I was not invested in him as a character as much as I was in Laura. And I didn't realize until after how much she really connected with me. But when I got to the end, and we got to the place where just remember Sebastian comes back. Duke is dead. He jumped. Did he jump? Did he dive? Was it an accident? I don't really know. And he died. And Sebastian comes to the farm, and we find that Duke had come back that day. You guys, that day. We talk about the day when Pallas and Sebastian and Laura and Duke go to the farm because Laura's been invited. And of course, they all invite themselves to go. And they have this glorious day, this moment, right? Guess what? I recognize our down here. Going back to live the same day over, right? Duke gets to do that in his death, but we don't know that. And we find that he had come back again. And Laura tells us she didn't know that he had come back and met with Joe's aunt and uncle. She tells the story of when he came back for her, and then I think he might have come back another time. But Sebastian comes back and says, he wanted to buy the farm and they wouldn't sell it. So he paid them to be able to be buried here, which got them out of debt, which in essence, like that thing, secured Joe and Laura's future and for their kids and their life and their family. And then he's coming back to be buried in the cemetery. Literally, her past will be buried under her nose until the day she dies. And again, the kind of revisiting the past and revisiting the stories we tell ourselves. Do we ever really escape that? Because he's there with her. It's all tied together because everything leads to the next thing. And the moment that I realized that I understood Laura the most was when Sebastian, so you know how we all know what was going on between Pallas and Duke, okay? Laura knew in her heart what was happening. I don't think she was that naive, but we don't always pay attention. We don't always pay attention to what's happening right under our noses, right? We're living our lives and we're dealing with the things that are happening. So she's in the wheelchair, and I found it really telling that the gentleman who came to take her to see the shows would put her in the wheelchair and push her into the theater and then leave her there and then come back and get her. She never got out of the chair. Sebastian brings her there and carries her in front and center and puts her in the chair, moves the wheelchair in the back. Did you notice that? Is that a thing I noticed that? Because she is now both being carried and helped and supported in a way that she had not been before, and also kind of abandoned. Because if you've ever been in a situation where you can't walk or you're away from your crutch, whatever that is, my car wouldn't start today, you guys. There was panic mode, okay? You know what I'm talking about? Like your way of getting out of the situation is not there. She trusted Sebastian, and God love him because he was one of my favorite people in there. When they saw what was happening on the stage, the world saw how both of them were being betrayed, and he left her. She sat there. I'm going to read what she said because it was such a powerful moment for me. I guess I liked the book more than maybe I got it. I don't know. Let's see, page 250. Okay, when we finally finished, the audience leapt to their feet to applaud, and Sebastian pushed his way down the row and was gone. It was the last I would see of him. I sat there in the pale blue dress my grandmother made and my enormous plaster cast and waited. I hadn't understood that Palace and I were in a race, but we were, and she had won. When people asked if I needed any help, I told them no. My friend was coming right back, but after another half hour, after every other person had trickled away, I had to concede that not even good old St. Sebastian was coming to get me. That was when I saw how the backs of the theater seats could provide a stable means of transfer. I stood and held one, and then the next, and then the next, hopping my way to the aisle and then hopping my way up the stairs, row by row, all the way back to where my wheelchair was waiting. I used the chair as a walker, pushing it through the door until I got outside and got myself seated and got myself very slowly back home in the dark. Funnily enough, this turned out to be the thing that saved me, the knowledge that I could get back by myself. So Laura goes on. She goes home, she goes and sews, she connects with Joe, and she creates the life that she didn't really realize that she always wanted. One thing led to the next thing, which led to the next thing. And the past was part of that. The present thing that she wanted and has would never have come to be had the past not done that. Had she not let it happen to her, and had she not built it by being in the present there. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So that was my sort of adventure in Tom Lake. I connected with it this week as I'm untangling my own past, right? Like, it's the new year. Let's make some resolutions about stuff we're really not going to do because we don't really want to do it. But if we say we're going to do it, we can at least say we tried. And trying it's an A for effort. I'm in a tangible thing. I'm undoing a house that's got 30 years of stuff in it, and which means everything has a memory to it. And and maybe I'm staying there, maybe I'm not. I don't know what's going to happen in this house. None of us know what's going to happen in this house. But I just know that if stuff doesn't get moved, if stuff doesn't get taken care of, there is not going forward. And I am doing an everything leads to the next thing. It's 1 hour a day, one thing, and I will. By the end of the year, the house will be clean. I don't know. And so the tangling of the past was meaningful to me. Laura's story was meaningful to me, not because of her theater, which I do appreciate being asked because of the connection, but in the end, it's the process, right? It's the process of being present. It's the process of taking the next step. It's the process of letting your past tangle and untangle itself with you, of being willing to be hurt, of willing to grow from that, of willing to just walk away. I mean, y'all, she wasn't a bad actress, right? Am I right? Like, she was in a movie. Her husband says, and he was a good director who said, "You're a good actress." Like, if your mom wanted to be an actress, she could have been good. That wasn't what she wanted. And so it's a new year. I asked you to let go. We read a book. I want all your feedback on it. And then we're going to move forward when we leave here to whatever life brings for us next. Just the next thing. It doesn't matter what your plan is. Don't make a resolution to try to get something done by the end of the year. My house will never get clean. I just need to do one thing today. One thing. Because everything leads to the next thing. All right. Oh, you don't have to clap. There's nothing to clap at on that. That's where I am with Tom Lake. I want to know what you're thinking, what you felt. Clearly, some of you loved the book.
Yeah, who in our audience would like to kick off with comments or questions?
Well, I think I like the book a lot more than, I don't know, maybe most people, because I ended up listening to it as audio. And it was read by
Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep. So I think she gave a lot more meaning to certain parts of the book than when you're just reading, but it was before Christmas and I had a lot to do. It was on my list and I was like, I can't sit and read a book, but I could listen to a book while I vacuum and such. So anyway, I enjoyed it a lot. I do think the one thing you just said, Laura did realize that she didn't want to be like Duke and Palace because she saw how actually terrible they were. And I think that's what changed her mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did anybody else listen to the book as opposed to read? Anybody listen? Oh, good. Okay. I have a lot of friends who keep telling me they read books that they actually listen to. And I'm like, I wonder if the experience is really that different. I don't do audiobooks and I can't, yeah.
Just quickly, a really very, very good lifetime friend of mine had her book club yesterday. And I said, what book did you read? And she said, Tom Pink. And I said, how did you like it? My book club read it last year, so it's been a while since I read it. And my feeling was kind of like, but I love our town. And so the fact that that was so central to it made it really special to me. And I'm from Michigan, and I've picked cherries in Michigan, so that made it special to me as well. But the whole Duke thing, I don't know. My friend said that she read it last year as well, and then getting ready for book club, listened to the Meryl Streep reading of it. She said it brought meaning, that just and it made the book so much more special to her. So
yeah. I wonder if it's kind of like reading the play, right? Like it isn't brought to life the way that it is when other people are interacting with it. And I'm wondering if that's part of this book.
She changed her voice,
because it's Meryl Streep.
Yeah, it's Meryl Streep. I don't know, because you guys, I would read like I read it after. You guys, can I just tell you? I absolutely love this book so much.
Joanne wants us to do that book for the next season.
And
yes, and
it is. It is gorgeous, and it is about theater, and it is about writing a play, and it's about it is magical realism. Okay, so you have to believe that someone will turn into a shark, and that's a normal medical condition. If you can suspend that, which it's seamless in here. But he teaches our town, and there is art, like it plays in here as well. Shark Heart, a love story. Yes, I'm sorry. But here's the thing. I went from like this emotion to reading Tom Lake. I'm like, Dina, I don't think I can do this. Like, I don't like this book. She goes, that's okay. You can talk about that. Talk about how you don't like it. I said, great. So I'd read it and I'd put it down. I'd read it and I'd put it down. I read like 4 books in between. And every time I picked it up, I was like, oh, they're still here. And I would just see what happened in their lives. And then I would move on. I didn't connect, and I'm wondering if maybe listening to it would have been better.
Yeah, I remember saying that too. I was like,
you did.
Listen to Meryl Streep.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't listen.
Like her.
I can't concentrate on the book. Like it's so. I don't know. I'm gonna have to check. You know what? I don't care about the characters enough to actually make the effort to listen to it. If I'm being honest with you, but the story and what happened, I want to hear more about what you thought.
Yeah, let me write my thing.
And you guys, while she's doing that, I've never done one of these before. If this is not what you expected for books sandwiched in, please raise your hand and say, please do this. I prefer if you do this, because I'll adjust.
So Patchett's my Meryl Streep. So I totally love this book. I love the writing of it. I'm a mother of 2 adult daughters, and I thought the relationship with the daughters was so fabulous, that each daughter was so uniquely herself, and they were so obvious. The names that came from Laura's life. That was so wonderful.
What about at the end when they say Duke says that he always wanted to live on a cherry farm and have a daughter named Emily?
A friend of mine said, I hated that ending. I'm like, why? And she said, I didn't like Duke was being buried there. And I said, I thought it showed how insignificant he was.
Yes.
He had this one great day, and she's had a great life.
Yeah, that was
these wonderful children. I just thought the book was fabulous. My 2 daughters read it. We went to see Our Town on Broadway a month ago. And we had wonderful experiences.
You're invested in this story then.
You're coming around.
Yeah, keep talking because you're invested in this. Like you're going to bring way more. I felt like the concept of burying my past, because again, like we're all going through stuff. Life is changing for me. I am not, I don't want to bury my past, right? I think if my past was buried in front of me, I might be okay with that as long as it isn't reaching out of the grave to grab me all the time. Because it makes you who you are. And I think it's, time changes perspective. Things that were like really heavy are in distance, have like the edges have worn off to become sort of like a comforting story, like the stories we tell ourselves, like the stories that are most familiar to, I forget the quote, like they're comforting to us, and that's okay with that. I'm okay with Duke being buried there. It's just ashes. He'll be gone and rotted. I mean, it's just whatever.
I like what you said about life being a process, and we go from think slash to thing in that linear way. In modern technology, I think we could all look back on our lives and say, can I push the delete button on that and move to that? I think as far as liking a book, a lot of it has to do with your worldview and what you personally bring to the book, what your expectations are. Sometimes we look at a title and we think, oh, it's going to be this, this, and this. And you get through with the whole book and you wonder, how did it relate to the title? Reading is such an individual, personalized process. And I do believe there's a big difference between seeing something on the stage or on the screen and reading it, and just auditorily. Meryl Streep or whoever else reads a book brings something to the book through their voice that you might not have focused on that particular thing when they're reading. So, however anybody interprets a book is really right for them, and you can't apply anything in a blanket to everybody. So what you're bringing is unique and interesting and different, and I like that you admitted you didn't like the book.
I didn't hate it. It grew on me. You know what? How do you ever reread? Does anybody here reread books over and over? Okay, because like I've read that twice. I'm reading a book right now called The Good Mayor that I picked up at the dollar store like 5 or 10 years ago. I don't even know. It's this paperback. It's such a delightful book. It's about these two people who are in love with each other, who work together, and they can't admit it. And then it's a beautiful thing. And then like there's a crash, and then this weird ending that's just so lovely, and it's so comforting to me. Like I read it again. I may read this book again in a time when it's different for me, because it's always different, isn't it? Like every time you revisit a story. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
When our committee was discussing which books to do, we had some of us commenting on just liking, again, you mentioned liking some parts during the year 2020 of isolation and all of that. Does anyone want any comments on that if they thought it was?
Yeah, I'll comment on that, because I totally forgot we had that conversation. So the fact that this took place during the pandemic was probably the main reason I didn't want to read it to start with, because I'm over it. Okay, I am all I did everything. I stayed home. I am a very big take care of each other by taking care of yourself, right? I did not panic in the pandemic, because you want to know what happened in the pandemic? Everyone's bar for what is acceptable, normal, successful behavior was on the floor. And for the first time in decades, I was not the failure that I thought I was. And so in there, I did things like, someone said, I was teaching an improv class at a theater, and it got cut in half. So I said to the people, like, let's meet, like we can try to do something. And someone said, we use this thing at RIT called Zoom. Would you like to try this? And I'm like, I'm not a technological person. I said, you set it up and you let me know like what I'm supposed to do. And so we started having improv on Zoom, and mostly we just met and saw each other's faces and talked. And I was like, ooh, this is like a little magic elixir someone just gave me. What else can I do to connect with people who are not in the same space? So I started doing this thing called the exquisite collaboration poem. And what I would do is I did it complicated at first, but in the end I found an easier way, because I learned how to use a Google form. I would have people from all around the world, submit a response to a prompt, a poem prompt. And it was oftentimes just like, write one sentence about something you want to let go. Your inspiration is the best piece of advice you ever got. So people would go to the form and input these things, and then I would compile them into glorious pieces of poetic prose. I mean, and I like one time the prompt was like, wherever you are, line number 1, 5 things you can see. Line number 2, 4 things you can smell. 3 things, I would do that. And then I would say, what time is it where you are, and what city do you live in? And I called, the poem was 24 hours around the world, because literally people around the world. I had a lot of people in Hong Kong because I had a friend there. And it was just capturing these moments of people who said, I'm not creative. I'm not a poet. I don't know how to do this. And I'm like, I know you're wrong about that. And so Jeff Spivak picked it up and wrote about it. And then Jeff Spivak is now a very good friend of mine. And so, like, in the pandemic, when everyone was panicking, I was touchdown, because I was like, I just can stay home. I don't have to get dressed. I had 2 I was just like happy to be at the computer and to be trying these things, because if it failed, who cared? Then everybody got those ring lights and figured out how to like monetize it, and all of a sudden I was back to where I was before. But I had grown as like a creative person in the sense that I didn't have to worry. That's when I started teaching classes online. That's when I'm going to do a blackout poetry workshop. I learned, I started doing something called Recharge Your Creativity. I would just throw it on Facebook, and on this day, just at this time, click this Zoom link, and we're going to see each other's faces, and I'm going to walk you through an hour's worth of creative prompts. And that's how I was like, I actually am a teacher. And then I learned I got connected with a teaching artist group, and they did training during the pandemic from home. I didn't have to leave my house. 2 years of that, and I became a mentor for that. I'm so glad you asked this question, because this actually really does tie into what we're talking about. And then I learned, what is a teaching artist? You know what a teaching artist is? It's a person who uses their art form in a way of education, right? So I go into schools. I helped at East High School 7 years. I did improv with the high school students there. I started getting connected with people in the community. I ended up doing a sidewalk project 2 years ago, where they asked me to create art. I don't do that kind of art, but I got a student to do it, and we did this thing. She has this thing that was created before she went to college, because everything leads to the next thing. The pandemic was good for me, and I'm glad the book was not about the pandemic. And maybe that's why I'm realizing, even as the words are coming out of my mouth right now, why that part resonated with me, because here they were, forced to be together and happy about it. I don't know, was anyone else? I hope you were happy during the pandemic. So thank you for that. Any thoughts on that and how that tied into your life or the story? And if you want to talk about something that doesn't have to do with the book, I'm fine with that. Bring up whatever you want.
This is not so much about the book, but I'm in a book club, and one month I recommended a book, and everyone hated it.
What was it?
Something about apricots. I don't remember.
Okay.
The word apricot was in the title.
Okay.
And then and at the end I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry I recommended this book. And they said, no, don't be sorry. We had a great time talking about how much we hated it.
Right.
So I'm just saying, everyone has a different feeling.
And someday, something about that book is going to pop in every single one of those person's lives. They're going to be, oh, wow, that little connection of something, even if it's you hated that book too. I didn't even know other people read that book. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. That makes me feel validated.
Does anyone have anything else? I think I'm not Anne Patchett's biggest fan. I like her, but I think that listening to this one made me like it a lot, and I think it was. I feel like she's a really good storyteller, even when the story's not really about.
I know. I think that's what I felt like. This book was not about anything. And again, it wasn't until this week when I was like, oh, but it is about so much. But I think it was about so much that I didn't need to think about until now. Right?
Yes. And the way that she weaves the story together, slowly revealing more connections and pieces. Like you just think, for me, for the first whatever half of the book or whatever, I was like, Laura's husband is just in the dark, right?
Yes, I did too.
Right?
Like poor Joe, he's such a dummy. He has no idea what's going on.
Right. And then you realize he was part of this whole thing. And the way she wove that together without overtly saying anything.
Yes.
I thought it was really brilliant.
Yes.
In the storytelling.
Because I'm so glad you said that, because there was one thing that she said, that there was a quote in here. You keep talking because I have to find it. So that was such a revelation for me, because here they all have these stories. Emily thinks that Peter Duke is her father at some point. I'm like, where? Like, I don't know. That should have been an easy calculation to figure out. But they think he came, and they, all this stuff. And she says, because the girls think their parents fell in love at Tom Lake. And the father's like, no. And they're like, yeah, like you fell in love with Tom Lake. And he's like, no, I don't think I did. Like, I did my thing, and I left and came back and came back to the cherry farm. And your mother did this thing, and she went to audition for Spalding Gray. And they're like, Spalding Gray. And she's like, here's what she says. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, okay, maybe not. Oh, I came up with Duke, left with Duke, didn't leave with. Okay, maybe not on that day, but eventually you did. You were with Duke, and then you were with Dad. I shake my head. A child's ability to misunderstand is limitless, even when she's no longer a child. I didn't leave Duke for your father. Your father and I were never together at Tom Lake. Now Maisie is squinting at us as well. But you and Dad met at Tom Lake. You fell in love at Tom Lake. We met at Tom Lake and didn't fall in love. And then we met again a long time later, and we did fall in love. Joe says to them, he looks at me, I feel like I need a lawyer. Because now we shift from Laura and Joe and Maisie and Nell on one side and Emily on the other, to Laura and Joe on one side and Emily and Maisie and Nell on the other. The jury does not believe us. You fell in love at Tom Lake, Nell says. Of this she is certain. That was always the story. It was never the story, I say. It may have been the story you told yourselves, but it wasn't the story we told you. Right? Like how much we craft the past to be the way that we need it to be, to make the story comforting for us. How much better that those girls think that their parents fell in love at Tom Lake and their mother left Peter Duke for their dad, rather than to know she was just humiliated and dumped by this Peter Duke that they revered. These children revered their whole life, and that their dad was not like it just is different. Yes.
Any other comments?
But she never told her kids. She never told her kids that she was dumped by Peter Duke, because she even admits that she erased that from her memory.
I got to go back and look, because that was part of the thing that stopped me as I was reading, is that because I would read and put it down, and then I would pick it back up, and I would put it down, and I'd pick it back up, and I didn't go back to sort of revisit. I couldn't tell what she told him and what she didn't tell him, and I know she didn't tell him about the mental institution thing, which clearly she shouldn't. But did they know that? Is that true? I thought that she told them that. No.
In terms of like her telling and not telling, the other thing that I didn't really like about this book, and in general, in fiction overall, it's like, in order to suddenly make things dramatic and complicate things, someone gets pregnant.
Oh, right. And they dangled that a little bit, didn't they?
Yes, like a couple times in this one. And I'm like, it's just like, come on. Like, they drop this like it's so huge thing. It never happens in the world. And I'm like, and Pat, I feel like you could either leave this out, you don't need it, or you could do better with something else that's sort of less predictable.
You're talking about the Emily, where Emily thinks that Peter Duke's her dad?
No, when Laura.
Laura was pregnant?
Wasn't that at one point?
That was at the end.
Yeah. Right?
Laura, what? Wait. Wait, time out, you guys. I know I finished this book, but Laura had an abortion?
Yeah, and she doesn't tell her kids. She doesn't tell anybody.
Oh, after the mental institution. Yes. How did I forget that, you guys? So focused on trying to catch up on Our Town, I missed probably one of the big things there. Right?
Two copies in the back.
What is this book about? What is this book about? Someone please explain that.
We probably skipped over it because it was too
No, I
easy
do
of a
remember.
point to throw in.
I do. I remember that. Okay, so let me ask you this. Did anybody care that Duke died? Because by that time, I didn't care. Like, I felt like we were leading up to this big reveal. And I'm like, I feel like we knew that already. And like, I'm a big cozy mystery fan, okay? Like, I'm a BritBox and Acorn. You just bring me Vera all day long. And I know I'm watching. I've solved these things. So by the time we get to the end, I'm like, I told you. So in this one, it was so early. I'm like, please, you like let that cat out of the bag. So by the time he died, I'm like, I don't care anymore. It has no bearing on this. Forgot about that abortion. This is why you. No, well, this is why asking me to do a book sandwich was a really risky move, you guys, because she said you can talk about the book or you can, and be entertaining. I told her I can only do one of those things. So you pick which one actually was successful today.
You guys did a great job.
All right, I want to just leave you with one thing. This is a blessing for you to take with you. A little poem I wrote on New Year's. The old has been wrung out and then wrung out like a bell. Let the new be welcomed in with the peal of possibility. Let that which is no more remain in its grave, and let that which is to come breathe deeply and live. I hope your coming year is filled with possibility, and that all that is to come to you, you allow space to just live. On the table over there, I don't have business cards because I can't, whatever, it doesn't matter. So instead, there are cards with my contact information, and each one of them has a prompt on the other side that you can use for journaling, conversation starter. You can ask each other questions in the car on the way home, reflection. I don't care. So please feel free to take as many as you want of those because they're all different.
Thank you so much.
Aw.
Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.